The cafe was full that morning. The sound of chatter and coffee cups mixing with the smell of roasted beans and fresh bread. People rushed in and out, some grabbing takeaways, others sitting near the windows to enjoy a few quiet moments before work. The old clock above the counter ticked steadily, marking another ordinary day. No one noticed the young waitress moving quietly between the tables, her tray steady, her smile soft but distant. Her name was Emily, and she was always the same, polite, calm and quiet. She never raised her voice, never seemed tired, and never complained even when customers were rude. The other staff liked her, but they didn't know much about her. She came on time, did her work, and left right after closing. She didn't join them for drinks or gossip. While the others laughed during breaks, Emily would stand near the window, lost in thought sometimes. She'd look at the corner of the cafe where an old upright piano sat, covered in dust and surrounded by chairs that hadn't been played in years. The manager had bought it from a yard sale just for decoration. But to Emily, that piano wasn't decoration. It was memory. Whenever she passed by it, her eyes softened. Her fingers sometimes twitched as if remembering the feeling of pressing keys. No one else noticed, but inside her heart, music was still alive. Hidden behind her calm face and quiet steps, she could still hear melodies playing in her mind when the cafe was loud. And when the night came and the lights dimmed, she sometimes hummed to herself while cleaning. There was something delicate about her, something that didn't quite belong in the noisy cafe. The customers came and went, always in a hurry. But Emily moved slowly, gracefully. Every action seemed careful. The way she placed cups, the way she refilled sugar, even the way she smiled at strangers. She had a sadness behind her eyes that few people noticed, the kind that comes from someone who's lost something important. Once a customer asked her, "Do you play the piano?" Because he noticed the way she looked at it. Emily froze for a second, then smiled faintly and said, "I used to." That was all she said, then she turned and walked away. The man didn't know that her answer carried years of pain. Emily had once dreamed of being a musician. She had played piano since she was a child. Her mother had been her biggest supporter, clapping after every little tune she learned. But after her mother's death, Emily stopped playing. The music reminded her too much of what she lost. The piano keys became painful instead of joyful, so she walked away from it all and took a job at the cafe just to survive. Still, no matter how hard she tried to forget, her heart wouldn't let go. When the cafe was empty late at night, she sometimes sat near the piano and whispered, "Just one more time." But she never had the courage to play. She feared that if she started, all her buried emotions would come rushing back to everyone else. Emily was just the quiet waitress, the one who remembered every order, who smiled kindly even when customers were impatient. No one thought there was anything special about her. She didn't dress fancy, didn't speak much, and always kept to herself. But inside her chest, there was a storm, a mix of grief, longing, and love for something she thought she'd lost forever. One rainy morning, as thunder rolled outside, Emily served coffee to a table of regulars who were laughing loudly. They teased her gently about always being so calm. One of them said jokingly, "You never surprise anyone, Emily." She just smiled politely, but deep down something in her heart stirred. Maybe it was the way the rain sounded like soft music on the windows, or maybe it was the ache that had grown too heavy to carry. When she looked at the piano again that day, her reflection showed faintly in its dark surface. She could almost see her younger self sitting there, smiling, fingers dancing across the keys. For a brief moment, she felt that same spark she had when her mother was alive. The cafe was busy, life was ordinary, and yet something unseen began to wake up inside her. Emily didn't know it yet, but her quiet routine and her secret longing were about to collide. The day would come soon when that piano, long forgotten by everyone else, would become her voice again, and when she finally touched its keys, the world around her would stop to listen. No one in that cafe, not her coworkers, not her boss, not even Emily herself, could imagine what was coming next. The morning rush had passed, and the cafe settled into its quiet rhythm. The smell of coffee still floated in the air, but the laughter and noise had faded. Emily wiped down the tables, her movements steady and practiced. Her coworkers chatted behind the counter, joking about tips and customers, but she stayed silent, just listening. From time to time, she glanced at the piano in the corner, the same old piano no one cared about, covered in a thin layer of dust. The sunlight from the window hit its wooden surface, making it look alive again as if it too was waiting for something. Behind the counter, two waitresses whispered, thinking Emily couldn't hear. "She's so quiet," one said. "I swear she's hiding something." The other giggled. "Maybe she used to be famous and messed up big time." They laughed softly, and Emily pretended not to notice. She'd heard it all before, and the guessing, the gossip. The stories people made up because she never shared her own. The truth was simpler and sadder than anyone imagined. Emily wasn't mysterious, she was broken. There had been a time when her life was full of music, when every morning started with the sound of piano keys instead of coffee machines, but that life had ended the day her mother's heart stopped beating. The silence that followed had been unbearable, so she stopped playing too. Her co-workers didn't know that every note she played used to carry her mother's laughter. They didn't know that the songs she wrote had once filled a tiny apartment with warmth, or that the piano in this cafe reminded her of the one she'd lost when she sold it to pay the rent. To them, she was just a kind, quiet girl with no ambition. But to Emily, every day felt like walking through the ashes of a dream. That afternoon, the cafe filled up again. A few college students came in, talking loudly about a local music competition. "You should totally join, Maya," one said. "You're amazing." Their voices made Emily's chest tighten. She turned away quickly, pretending to rearrange the sugar jars. But inside, something twisted, envy maybe, or longing. She missed that feeling of chasing a dream, of having something to look forward to. Later, during her short break, she sat near the window with a cup of tea. Outside, the rain had begun to fall lightly. The piano stood just a few feet away, and her reflection shimmered across its glossy top. For a moment, she reached out. Her fingers stopped just inches from the keys. Her heart raced, the cafe door opened suddenly, and she pulled her hand back, embarrassed. "Emily!" Her manager called from the counter. "We've got a reservation at 5. Get the tables ready." She nodded and got to work, pretending that nothing had happened. But for the rest of the day, she couldn't shake the feeling that the piano had been calling her name. When the evening came, a group of regular customers sat near the piano, laughing and joking. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, pointed at it. "You ever play that thing?" he asked Emily when she came over with their drinks. She froze, then smiled politely. "Not anymore," she said. "That's a shame," he replied. "We could use some real music in here." The others chuckled, and the moment passed, but Emily's heart didn't calm down. That night after the cafe closed, she stayed behind to clean. The rain had stopped, and the street outside glowed under the yellow lights. The piano sat there silent, waiting. She finished sweeping the floor, then walked toward it slowly. Her hands trembled as she touched the keys. They felt cold and familiar. She pressed one softly. The sound echoed through the empty cafe, clear and beautiful. Her eyes filled with tears. She pressed another key, then another. The sound grew into a fragile melody, one she hadn't played since her mother's funeral. The memories flooded back, her mother's smile, her small apartment, the promise she'd made to keep playing. She stopped suddenly, pulling her hands away as if the keys had burned her. "Not now," she whispered. "I can't." She closed the piano lid and walked out. But that night, as she lay in bed, the sound of the notes replayed in her head over and over. It was like her heart had remembered how to speak after years of silence. The next morning, when she arrived at work, her co-workers noticed something different. Emily still smiled the same way, still spoke softly, but there was a quiet light in her eyes. They couldn't tell what had changed, but something had somewhere deep inside her. A spark had been reignited, she didn't know when or how, but she felt it sooner or later. She would play again, and when that moment came, the world around her would finally see the person she truly was. Not just the quiet waitress with the tired smile, but the girl whose music could make even strangers cry. The piano in the corner waited silently, its dust catching the morning sun like a promise. The stormy evening brought with it a strange kind of calm. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, and the cafe lights glowed warmly against the wet glass. Inside, Emily worked as usual, cleaning tables, serving customers, and keeping her smile steady. But something inside her was different now. The quiet tug she'd felt the night before hadn't faded. It had grown stronger. It was as if the piano in the corner had whispered to her, asking her to return. That day, the cafe had a new group of customers. 3 businessmen and a woman in a red coat. They laughed loudly, their voices filling the room. The woman pointed at the piano and said, Does anyone ever play that thing? The manager chuckled. Not in years, it's mostly for decoration. What a waste, she said with a smile. A piano should sing, not sit, Emily heard that, and her heart thumped hard. She turned quickly, pretending to wipe a nearby table. As the evening went on, the cafe grew quieter. The rain picked up again and thunder rolled in the distance. Suddenly the lights flickered, then went out. A few customers gasped. Someone shouted, "The power's gone!" The manager rushed to check the fuse box, but it didn't help. Within minutes, the cafe was lit only by candles on the tables and the glow of cell phones. People grumbled, restless and bored. "Great," one man said. "Now we just sit here?" The woman in red laughed. "Maybe we should have some music." Her friend joked, "Yeah, who's gonna play?" Another voice from the back said teasingly, "Maybe the waitress can play us a song." Everyone laughed. Everyone except Emily. For a moment, the sound of rain against the windows was the only thing filling the silence. Emily froze behind the counter. Her heart raced so fast she could barely breathe. The manager, trying to lighten the mood, called out, "Come on, Emily, you used to play, right? Give them a tune." He didn't mean it seriously, but everyone turned to look at her. Emily felt heat rise to her face. Every eye in the cafe was on her. She shook her head gently. "Oh no, I can't." But then someone clapped their hands and said, "Come on, it'll pass the time." A few others joined in, smiling encouragingly. Her co-workers looked surprised, and they had never seen Emily nervous before. She always seemed so composed. So calm, her palms were sweaty, her legs felt weak. But something inside her whispered again. That same quiet voice from before. "Just one note," it said. She took a deep breath, wiped her hands on her apron, and slowly walked toward the piano. The laughter faded. The room grew still. The only sound was the steady rhythm of rain. Emily sat down on the wooden bench. It creaked softly under her weight. She stared at the keys. Dust gathered along their edges. Some of them yellowed with age. Her reflection flickered in the candlelight, and she could almost see her younger self sitting there. Smiling, her hands hovered above the keys. Trembling slightly, then she pressed one. The sound was faint at first, pure and soft. It rang through the cafe. Cutting through the rain, a few people turned toward her. The note hung in the air like a held breath. Then she pressed another and another. The melody began to form. Slow, gentle, filled with emotion she couldn't hide. The cafe fell silent. The customers stopped talking. The laughter was gone. Even the woman in red, who had started the teasing, leaned forward, eyes wide. The candles flickered with every note, casting dancing shadows on Emily's face. She closed her eyes and let her fingers move. Her body swayed slightly, lost in rhythm for the first time in years. Emily didn't think about who was watching. She didn't think about work or pain or fear. She thought about her mother, about mornings filled with music, about joy before loss. Every note carried a memory. Every pause carried a breath of the past. The storm outside roared. Lightning flashed across the sky, but no one looked away. Even the manager stood frozen behind the counter, completely still. It wasn't just beautiful, it was powerful. Raw, human. When the final note faded, there was silence. No one spoke. No one even breathed for a moment, then suddenly, applause exploded through the cafe. It started with one clap, then another, until everyone was standing. Cheering, Emily sat there, her eyes wet with tears. Her chest rising and falling, she smiled faintly and whispered, "Thank you." Her co-workers stared at her like they were seeing her for the first time. No one expected it, not the customers, not the manager, not even Emily herself, but in that moment, something had changed forever. The quiet waitress had just reminded everyone, and herself, that sometimes the most ordinary people carry the most extraordinary stories, and it only takes one brave moment to let them be heard. The cafe was still buzzing long after the power came back. The lights flickered on, but no one cared. The customers were still talking about what they had just witnessed. Some replayed the moment on their phones. Others whispered in disbelief. The waitress who barely spoke, the one who always kept her head down, had just played the piano like a professional. Her music had filled the room with something words couldn't describe. Emily sat quietly on the bench, her hands trembling on her lap. She wasn't sure if she should smile, cry, or run. The sound of applause still echoed in her ears. Her heart beat fast, her chest tight. It had been years since she played, yet somehow every note had come naturally. Her body remembered what her heart had forgotten. She had been afraid of those keys for so long, but when she finally touched them, they didn't hurt. They healed. Her coworkers rushed over, faces lit up. "Emily, that was incredible." One said, "You never told us you could play like that." Another added. The manager smiled wide, half shocked, half proud. "You've been hiding talent this whole time?" He said, trying to keep his voice steady. Emily just laughed softly. "I didn't plan to," she said. "It just happened." When the last customers left, a few of them thanked her personally. "That was beautiful," said the woman in the red coat. "You should never stop playing." Emily nodded politely, though her mind was far away. As she locked up the cafe later that night, she stood by the piano one last time, tracing her fingers over its wooden frame. It was strange, and it didn't feel like an object anymore. It felt like an old friend, one she had finally spoken to after years of silence. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the melody. She remembered her mother's face, her laughter, the way she used to hum while cooking dinner. The memories came rushing back, both painful and comforting. Her heart ached, but in a gentler way now. She sat up in bed, tears rolling down her cheeks, whispering, "I did it, Mom." I finally played again the next morning. Emily arrived at work early. The cafe was empty. The sunlight pouring through the windows. She walked straight to the piano, lifted the lid, and began to play softly. The notes drifted through the still air like a secret. Her fingers felt light, alive for the first time. She wasn't hiding from her past, she was embracing it. Her manager walked in and froze at the door. He didn't interrupt, he just listened when she finished. He clapped quietly. "You know," he said, "we could use more of that around here. Maybe a live performance night." Emily looked up, surprised. "Me? Perform?" He grinned. "Why not? You already have fans." She blushed, laughing nervously. "I'm not ready for that," she said. "Maybe not yet, but soon," he replied. He was right. Part of her wanted to say yes, but another part still feared what would come next. Playing once had been easy when her mother was alive. Now it meant reopening old wounds. Over the next few days, customers kept asking about her. "Is the piano girl working today? When will she play again? That video online, is that her?" Someone had uploaded her impromptu performance to social media, and it was spreading fast. People were tagging the cafe, commenting and sharing. The quiet little coffee shop had become the talk of the town. Emily didn't know how to feel. She was flattered but terrified. Every time her manager showed her a new comment, her heart fluttered. "You're going viral." He said, "Look, 10,000 views overnight." Emily smiled shyly. "That's crazy," she murmured. Her coworkers teased her gently. "You're famous now." One said, "Don't forget us when you're rich." She laughed but shook her head. "I just wanted to play," she said softly. "That's all." But something deeper was happening inside her. Playing again had awakened something she thought she'd buried forever. It was more than talent, it was connection. Her mother had always told her, music isn't just sound, it's feeling. And now she understood. When she played, she felt her mother beside her again. She felt alive. That night, as she wiped the tables after closing, she stopped to look at the piano again. The candlelight from a nearby table shimmered across its surface. She smiled to herself and whispered, "Maybe I'll play again tomorrow." Outside, the rain began to fall once more, tapping softly against the windows, but this time, Emily didn't feel sad when she heard it. The rain no longer reminded her of endings. It felt like rhythm, like background music to a story that was finally beginning again. The cafe had changed, her world had changed, and so had she. Emily, the quiet waitress who once hid from her own heart, had finally found her way back to the music she thought she'd lost forever, and little did she know, the world was about to hear it too. The cafe door chimed softly as Emily walked in that morning. Her steps were lighter than usual, and though she wore the same uniform, there was something different in her eyes, a quiet glow. The moment she saw the piano, her lips curved into a faint smile. It no longer looked dusty or forgotten. The manager had wiped it down, polished it even, placing a small vase of flowers on top. "For our new star," he had said jokingly the night before. But the truth was, Emily wasn't sure how to feel about all the attention. The viral video had exploded overnight. The cafe's social media pages were flooded with comments. "Who is the waitress pianist? She plays like she's telling a story. That music made me cry." There were even reporters who had called, Asking for interviews, her manager had been thrilled. But Emily felt overwhelmed. She had played for herself that night, for her mother, for the memory she thought she lost, not for fame. Still, when she served customers that morning, she could feel the curious stares. Whispers floated around. "That's her," someone murmured. "The piano girl," another said. She smiled politely, pretending not to hear, but deep down she felt a mix of pride and fear. What if she played again and didn't sound as good? What if it was just a lucky moment? Later that day, during a slow hour, she sat alone at a corner table, watching raindrops slide down the window. The same rain that once felt sad now looked peaceful. Soothing, she thought about her mother again, about the last time they'd played together. It had been a quiet Sunday morning. Her mother had laughed when Emily messed up a chord. "Music isn't about perfection," she'd said. "It's about heart." Emily closed her eyes and whispered, "You'd laugh if you saw me now." "Mom?" A soft laugh startled her. "Talking to yourself again?" It was the manager, holding 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of her and sat down. "You know, people are coming in just to see you now," he said. "You should play again. Not for them, but for you." Emily smiled weakly. "I don't know if I can do it again." He nodded. "You said that last time, too." Then got up and left her with her thoughts. The cafe grew quiet again as the rain continued to fall. Only a few customers remained. An elderly couple by the window, a man reading a book, and a little girl sitting with her mother. Staring curiously at the piano, the girl suddenly asked, "Mommy, can someone play it?" Her mother smiled. "Maybe." "Sweetheart." Emily looked up. Her heart tugged. The little girl reminded her of herself, wide-eyed. Full of wonder, she took a deep breath and stood. Slowly, she walked toward the piano. Every step felt like a question, a challenge. The cafe hushed. Forks and cups stopped clinking. Even the man reading put down his book. She sat down, her reflection flickering on the polished wood. Her fingers hovered above the keys for a moment. Then gently she began to play. The first notes were soft, like whispers. Then the melody grew, warm, smooth, filled with life. This time it wasn't sorrowful. It was hopeful. It told a story, not of loss, but of rediscovery. The music danced like raindrops on glass, light and free. Her hands moved confidently now. Every touch deliberate. The little girl leaned closer. Eyes wide in awe, her mother smiled. Holding her hand as Emily played, something inside her bloomed. The cafe wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was her stage. Her second home. Every person listening felt connected by her music. The elderly couple smiled at each other. The man with the book closed it and just listened. Even the manager peeked from the kitchen door, wiping his hands on his apron, his expression soft when she finished. The last note lingered, floating in the quiet room like a sigh. Then came the applause, gentle but heartfelt. The little girl clapped the loudest. "Play again!" She shouted. Everyone laughed softly. Emily looked up, her cheeks flushed. "Maybe next time," she said kindly. The manager grinned. "Next time, huh? I'll hold you to that night." As the cafe closed, Emily stayed behind again. The lights were dim, the rain had stopped, and the city outside sparkled with wet streets. She sat at the piano, her fingers tracing the keys lovingly. "You were right, Mom," she whispered. "It's not about perfection." She began to play again, quietly, just for herself. The melody this time was gentle, like a promise. She knew now that she couldn't go back to hiding. Music was her gift, her truth, her way of remembering and healing. Outside, a passerby stopped to listen through the cafe window. A few others joined, smiling at the sight of the young waitress lost in her song. They didn't know her story, but they felt her heart in every note. And somewhere in that quiet corner cafe, Emily found what she had been searching for all along. Not fame, not applause, but peace. The music that had once broken her had finally brought her home again. The next morning began differently. The cafe was brighter than usual, filled with new faces and excited voices. The small chalkboard outside now read in bold letters, "Come hear the waitress pianist." Someone had added a doodle of a piano next to it. Emily blushed when she saw it as she arrived for her shift. She wanted to hide the sign. And yet a part of her felt proud. It was strange to think that a few days ago no one even knew she played. And now, people were coming just to hear her. When she stepped inside, her coworkers cheered playfully. "Our celebrity is here," One said, "You're trending again." Another added. The manager handed her a newspaper. On the second page, there was a photo of her sitting at the piano, lit by candlelight under the headline, "The Waitress Who Stunned the Town with One Song." Emily stared at it. Unable to believe it was real, her eyes filled with tears. Not of fear this time, but of gratitude. The day flew by in a rush of customers, laughter and the sound of clinking cups. Every table was full. The piano, once ignored, now stood proudly near the window. Polished and gleaming, children ran up to touch its keys. Couples took photos beside it. The cafe felt alive, warmer, different. It wasn't just a coffee shop anymore. It had become a place of inspiration. In the afternoon, the manager approached her with a nervous smile. "Emily," he said, "I've been thinking, what if we hosted a small live evening? You could play again, maybe just one or two songs. We could invite people, make it special." Emily froze. "A performance? Like on purpose?" He chuckled. Yes, on purpose this time. Her first instinct was to say no. Her heart raced at the thought. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she messed up? But then she remembered that night. The storm, the candles, the faces of people who had listened in silence. She took a slow breath. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's do it." The next few days were a blur. The cafe hung fairy lights, moved tables around, and put up posters that read, "Live Piano Night," featuring Emily, the waitress pianist. She practiced every night after closing, her fingers moving across the keys until late. Each song she chose had a piece of her heart in it. One for her mother, one for her journey, one for hope. Her co-workers supported her like family. "You'll be amazing," said Julia, one of the other waitresses. "I'll be crying in the front row." Emily laughed nervously. "Please don't, or I'll start too." The manager gave her the night off before the event. "Rest your hands," he said. "Tomorrow, you're not a waitress, you're the main act." The night arrived. The cafe was packed. Even people standing outside by the windows. A local news crew had shown up, filming quietly in the corner. Candles flickered on every table, and the air smelled of coffee and anticipation. Emily stood behind the curtain near the back, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The manager gave her a reassuring nod. "Ready?" She nodded slowly, then walked out. The moment the crowd saw her, they began to clap, not loudly, gently, lovingly. She smiled shyly, sat down at the piano and whispered to herself, just like before. Her fingers touched the keys, and the first note echoed through the room. The sound was clear, warm, like the start of a story. She played her first song, the same melody she'd played during the blackout, but this time with more emotion. Her hands were steady, her heart open. Every note carried her story, the loss, the silence, and the return of her voice. As she played, she saw faces soften, eyes glisten. People were leaning forward, holding their breath. The little girl from before was there too, sitting near the front, watching with wide, admiring eyes. Halfway through, Emily closed her eyes, letting the music guide her. She wasn't thinking anymore, she was feeling. The sound filled the cafe, flowed out the open door, and drifted into the quiet street outside. Even passers-by stopped to listen. When she struck the final chord, the cafe was silent, utterly still. Then, as the last note faded, applause thundered, louder than she'd ever heard before. People stood, clapping and cheering, shouting her name, "Emily! Emily!" Her co-workers hugged each other, some crying. The manager wiped his eyes with a napkin. Pretending not to, Emily stood slowly and bowed, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for listening." Her voice trembled, but it was full of peace. That night, after everyone left and the cafe was dark again, Emily sat at the piano one last time. The candles had burned low. Their light flickering softly across her face, she whispered, "We did it, Mom," then played a gentle tune just for her. No audience, no cameras, just her and the music. Outside, the rain began again, and soft and rhythmic, keeping time with her melody, and this time, it didn't sound like sorrow. It sounded like applause from heaven. The sun rose over the small town, turning the cafe windows gold. The day after the performance felt almost unreal to Emily. She sat on her bed, scrolling through her phone, messages and comments flooding her screen. Thousands of people had shared the video of her performance. The internet had given her a name, the waitress who played her heart out. There were news headlines, reaction videos, and even one post that said, Her music feels like healing. Emily stared at the screen, her heart swelling with disbelief. She hadn't played for fame or attention. She had simply wanted to share something that mattered to her. But somehow the world had listened, and now people everywhere were talking about her. Her manager called early that morning, his voice full of excitement. "Emily, you're not going to believe this," he said. "We've got people calling from the radio. The local TV station wants an interview. And there's even a music producer asking to meet you." Emily laughed nervously. "You're kidding. I'm serious," he said. "You've started something beautiful here." When she arrived at the cafe later, the atmosphere was electric. The staff clapped as she walked in. "The star is here." One shouted, "Autograph, please," joked another. Emily rolled her eyes playfully but blushed all the same. She wasn't used to attention, but she could feel the joy around her. The cafe had become more than just a workplace. It had become a family. That afternoon, as she served coffee to a group of new customers, one of them recognized her instantly. "You're the pianist," the woman said excitedly. "Your song made me cry last night. It reminded me of my dad. He used to play too." Emily's throat tightened. She smiled gently. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Everywhere she went, people were kind, genuine, moved by her story. For once, Emily wasn't the quiet girl in the corner. She was someone who had touched hearts. Still, inside she stayed humble, reminding herself that all of this had started with one small, brave moment, sitting down at that piano when everyone laughed. Later that evening, as the cafe began to close, her manager approached her with a serious expression. "There's someone here to see you," he said. "He's been waiting outside for a while." Emily wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside. A tall man stood near the window, holding a small folder under his arm. "Miss Emily?" he asked politely. "I'm Daniel Reed, a music producer." Emily blinked in surprise. "A producer?" He smiled. "I saw your performance online. Your playing isn't just skillful, it's emotional, real, that's rare. I wanted to meet you personally." Emily's heart raced. "I'm just a waitress," she said softly. He shook his head. "You're an artist who forgot who she was, and now you've found her again." His words hit deep. He handed her a card. "If you're ever ready, I'd like to help you record your music properly." That night, long after everyone had left, Emily sat alone in the cafe, the card resting beside the piano. The lights were dim, and the street outside was quiet. She ran her fingers across the keys, lost in thought. The idea of recording scared her, not because she doubted her talent, but because she knew it meant stepping into a new chapter, one where she'd have to believe in herself fully. She took a deep breath and played softly. The melody that filled the room was new, gentle but strong, filled with courage. It wasn't a song of sorrow or memory this time. It was a song of beginning, of hope. As she played, she thought of her mother again, her laughter echoing faintly in her mind. She smiled through her tears. "I think I'm ready now," she whispered. The next day, the cafe was busier than ever. People lined up outside not just for coffee but to see the piano. Some left notes on napkins that said things like, "Your music gave me strength," or "Please never stop playing." Emily collected them all in a small box under the counter. When she sat at the piano again that afternoon, she looked at the crowd, strangers who had become part of her journey. She took a deep breath and began to play the same melody she'd written the night before. The cafe filled with sound, rich and heartfelt. It wasn't perfect, a few notes slipped. Her fingers trembled once, but it didn't matter. When she finished, people cheered, some wiping tears. One woman shouted, "You're going to go far, Emily." The manager nodded proudly behind the counter. "She already has," he whispered that night. Emily wrote a short note on a napkin and taped it to the piano before leaving. It said, "For anyone afraid to start again, play your song anyway." The next morning, customers found it and smiled. The piano wasn't just decoration anymore. It had become a symbol of healing, courage, and rediscovered dreams. And for Emily, it wasn't just about playing music anymore. It was about living it, breathing it, sharing it. One song had changed everything, not because it was perfect, but because it was honest, and in that honesty, Emily had finally found her place in the world again. The weeks that followed felt like a dream Emily never wanted to wake from. The cafe was now more alive than ever. Soft music always playing, laughter echoing, customers taking photos beside the piano. and strangers dropping by just to say hello to the waitress pianist. Every morning when Emily walked in, she was greeted not by silence but by warmth. Her coworkers would grin and shout, "Our superstar's here!" And she'd laugh, shaking her head. "I'm still just Emily," she'd say, but deep inside, she knew she wasn't the same girl anymore. Her story had spread far beyond their small town. Articles appeared online about her. Music lovers wrote posts about how her performance gave them courage to chase their own forgotten dreams. Schools invited her to talk to students about hope and perseverance. Her inbox filled with messages from people she had never met. Some sharing their grief, others their gratitude. Each message reminded her why she played. Not for fame, not for applause, but for connection, for heart. One chilly morning, as she wiped the tables before opening, the manager walked in holding an envelope. "This came for you," he said, smiling. Inside was a letter from Daniel Reed, the music producer who had visited the cafe. It read, "Emily, your story has inspired thousands. I'd still love to help you record your music, not to make you a star, but to share your voice with the world." There was also a train ticket to his studio in the city. Emily stared at the letter for a long time, excitement and fear swirling together. The thought of leaving the cafe, her comfort zone, her safe space, frightened her, yet something inside whispered that this was the next step. She folded the letter carefully, slipped it into her apron, and spent the rest of the day quietly thinking. That evening, as the last customer left, she sat down at the piano. The cafe lights were dim, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and rain. She ran her fingers over the keys slowly, whispering, "What do you think, Mom? Should I go?" She could almost hear her mother's voice answering softly, "Play your song wherever it takes you." Emily smiled through her tears. She began to play a gentle tune, one she hadn't shared with anyone yet. The melody filled the empty cafe like a whisper of goodbye. It wasn't sad, it was peaceful, full of gratitude. The notes seemed to say thank you, and to the cafe, to her friends, to every stranger who had believed in her. The next morning she told her manager, "I'm going to the city." He looked at her, half proud, half emotional. "I knew this day would come," he said. "Promise me you'll visit. The cafe won't be the same without you." Emily smiled. "I'll come back, I promise." The day she left, the cafe staff gathered around to say goodbye. They gave her a small notebook filled with handwritten notes from customers. Each page held words of encouragement and love. "For our Emily," the manager said, "the girl who brought music back into our lives." She hugged them all tightly, tears glistening in her eyes. "You all made me brave enough to try again," she whispered. The train ride to the city was long, but Emily couldn't stop smiling. Outside the window, fields turned into skylines, and small towns into glowing towers. When she arrived at the studio, Daniel greeted her warmly. "You ready to make some magic?" he said. Emily laughed nervously. "I'll try." Recording her first song was nothing like she imagined. There were microphones, bright lights, and people watching. But when she sat at the piano and closed her eyes, the nerves faded away. She began to play, the same song she had played that night during the blackout. The notes came alive again, but this time they carried new meaning. She wasn't the broken girl anymore. She was the woman who had found her strength. When the final note faded, everyone in the room was silent. Daniel smiled. "You just captured something real, Emily. Something people will feel." And he was right. Within days of release, her song climbed charts online. Not because of fancy production, but because it was pure, raw, and honest. People wrote comments like, "This song feels like hope, and it made me cry. Thank you." Weeks later, Emily returned to the cafe. The staff cheered, the customers clapped, and the piano waited where it always had. She sat down, tears in her eyes. "I told you I'd come back," she said softly. The cafe was quiet, everyone watching as she began to play once more. Her hands moved gently, confidently. The melody was familiar but richer now. It carried her whole journey within it. When she finished, the applause filled the cafe again, and the manager leaned over the counter, smiling proudly. "You did it, Emily." She looked up at him, tears in her eyes but a wide smile on her lips. "No," she said softly. "We did it, outside." The sky was turning pink with sunset. The light spilled through the cafe windows and danced across the piano keys. And as Emily played one last soft tune, the sound carried out into the street. warm, gentle, timeless, reminding everyone passing by that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the quietest hearts. And for Emily, the quiet waitress who once feared her own melody, life had finally become what her mother always wanted it to be, a song worth playing,